I had a parishioner this past week tell me that she had undergone some quarantine renovations. And she described taking what was once, I believe she said, her tea room, and taking out all the nice things. And instead, she made it a home gym, which I'm fairly certain centered around a Bowflex, which, love the throwback. The Bowflex is great. I mean, I've never used it, but in theory, I love the Bowflex. But what I really like more is the posture of and the action of clearing away space that's not needed right now and creating that space to be used for something different. And I think that is what this practice of prayer offers us today. It is a form of contemplative prayer called centering prayer. Centering prayer really became formalized and super popular in the 70s by a number of monks that came from Thomas Merton. You might recognize that name. And really kind of spearheaded by this Trappist monk named Thomas Keating. And Keating describes and kind of cites centering prayer from Matthew 6:6, which says, "But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who's in secret, and your Father who sees you in secret will reward you." Now, this practice, this centering prayer, is different from maybe any other prayer you've tried before. It is not about intercession. It's not about bringing your life before God in discernment. It's not about adoration, confession, supplication, thanksgiving. It's not about those. This prayer is actually trying to cultivate something completely different. It's making space by creating interior silence. And the idea of going to your Father in secret, closing the doors, you're actually sitting with God in a place where it's just you and God. And what you're doing is you're simply sitting. And when you have thoughts, you're letting them go. You're just like letting them go. You're releasing them. This is a prayer that helps you let go of thoughts that continue to be in your brain or your heart. This type of prayer is what Christians would call like self-emptying. It's like kind of get them out there, pull them out. This Christian word is really kenosis, which comes from the Christ hymn in Philippians 2, where Paul talks about the self-emptying of God in Jesus, when he did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped. Instead, he emptied himself, and he took on the form of a slave. Great passage, by the way, Philippians 2. What this type of prayer does is it takes our thoughts, which, if we're honest, it's like a hamster wheel, right? We're always thinking, especially in quarantine. Maybe it's like sped up a little bit. You're thinking, how am I going to stay safe? How is my family? What are we going to have for dinner? How am I not going to go insane inside this home? How am I going to keep exercising? How am I going to afford my bills? What am I going to do when this is over? Is the world ever going to return to how it was before? The thoughts are going around. Guess what? Media speeds it up. Social media speeds it up. Fear speeds it up. But our thoughts are constantly churning. My arm is tired. My finger is tired. Your brain is tired. Centering prayer says, stop. Stop. It interrupts our thoughts, and it breaks the cycle of thoughts that may have continued to perpetuate, especially at a high speed in our brain. It interrupts them, and it allows us to look at them and let them go. What that does is it opens up space in our hearts, in our souls, in that place inside where God dwells. It opens up space for us just to sit in God's presence. Just to sit in God's presence. So here's how it works. It's a little weird to make a video about this because it is a thing that is meant to be experienced. So I'm going to link a bunch of other resources to make up for my lack of time to really explain this. But if you actually want to know what it's about, you've got to actually do it. Like this is not like a massive instructional video that's going to just make it all make sense. You have to do the thing. But here's essentially how it works. You've got to try and find a quiet place in your home or outside or someplace where you aren't going to be disturbed. This is just you and God. Put your phone away. You don't need it. And sit, not in the most comfortable chair or couch. You'll probably fall asleep. But sit upright. Take some deep breaths. And you're going to pick a word. This is called a sacred word. It's not necessarily a mantra. It can be a phrase, but essentially what it is something that comes to you that you can use to bring yourself back when you get distracted. So maybe it's Jesus. Maybe it's Alleluia. I say a little phrase that was taught to me a long time ago. Every time I start, I say, here I am, here you are, and here we are together. That's how I start out. So I'll take some deep breaths. I do set a timer, actually. That way I know when time has gone by, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe when you start out, try 5, give like 5 minutes to go. And as you kind of build up tolerance, as it were, try 10 or 20. Set the timer away so you're not tempted to look at that. And say your word, get your breathing in a normal pattern. Close your eyes and just be with God. And in that moment, you're going to have things that come to your mind, thoughts, things you need to do, people you need to talk with, a grocery list that needs to be filled out. You're going to have things that come to you. What happens in centering prayer is you see that thought, but you don't entertain it. You don't chase it down. Instead, what you do is you just let it go. You let it go. Another thought will come to you. You let it go. Maybe you'll have 100 thoughts, maybe 1,000 thoughts. But the idea is you continue to let them go. What you do is, as you let them go, you say goodbye to that thought, and you return back to that place with God, and you sit in quiet. This, all the while, is actually slowly making room in your heart for us to know more intimately God's love in an abiding quiet that is not just bound to this room or this space where you're sitting, but you can take out into the world. The only way I can think about explaining it to you is when I did this a couple years ago when I was in DC, I did 20 minutes a day for my Lenten discipline of centering prayer. And I'll be honest with you, it was kind of brutal when I first started. I kept having like 1,000 thoughts, and I felt distracted. I didn't feel like anything was happening. And I realized after a couple of weeks of committing to it, it became easier, and it also became really holy. There was something like sacred about that time. I felt transported from the place where I was. But probably the coolest moment was maybe about 3 weeks in. I was sitting on the DC Metro, and it was crowded and rush hour, and it was hot, and AC had been out, it's sweaty, everyone's miserable. And I found myself actually naturally just sitting upright, taking some deep breaths, closing my eyes, saying that phrase, and being transported away from the chaos of a crowded metro, but instead back to that place with God. And I was at peace in the midst of a crowd. And this practice, this space that you're making within your heart and your soul that is just you and God, it's not something that's constructive. It's not something that you think of as like a value added. But what it does actually is it's a deep wellspring that you can draw from in times where you feel parched, where you feel dry, and where you need to be able to cultivate some type of spiritual muscle that will help you to develop an even richer relationship with God. Ultimately, it's meant to be a tool in cultivating space and relationship, but I think it actually also creates empathy. I think it creates patience. And what it really does is it unbinds you from thoughts that previously may have grabbed you immediately and made your mind just race and race and race. Instead, it allows us to unbind ourselves from the things of this world and sit with God and just be at an incredible peace. Try it out. Centering prayer. The only way to know if it's something that you'll like is for you to give it a go. So I'll leave some more instructions in the description below. Be sure to check it out. There isn't a video that can address this within 10, 11, 12 minutes, but it's something that I think can follow you along as a companion in life in prayer, and it'll supplement all the other things that you do. Hit me up if you have questions or comments, and in the meantime, happy praying.